Garmaga, thank you, Cahirlock, and thank you, Leader of the House, Deputy Leader. I suppose I'm here to speak, of course, on the national planning statements for the Minister. And I suppose where I'm coming from is looking at Chapter 3 and Chapter 4 on the document here, which I suppose is looking at that in relation to the amendments been proposed, of course, but I suppose that my questions specifically are around looking at the regional economic and spatial strategy. Like the Northwestern Regional Assembly just released the regional infrastructure tracker just there yesterday or the day before. And when you look at the regional infrastructure tracker for the RSES, there's a challenge because obviously there's the Northwestern Regional Assembly, which is all the counties west of the Shannon and north up to Cavan, I guess. And then you have the Eastern and Midland Assembly. My area that I'm looking at, you have a growth town like Athlone, and then you have two other towns indicated like Ballinasloe and Roscommon Town. But say in Athlone, you're crisscrossing two RSES areas there, and that's an actual growth town. There's only 3 indicated in the NWRA, Northwestern Regional Assembly. Now, at a practical level, from what I understand, both Roscommon County Council and Westmeath County Council, work together to develop the town. But I suppose what I'd be curious about here is that the Minister, in reviewing the National Planning Statement, when it's looking at the high-level objectives, when it's taking into account the RSES and that's based on the census, how do you align if there are differences between one RSES for a particular town and the other, which is NWRA, say for the Northwestern Regional Assembly? So I suppose that's just my question in relation to the National Planning Statement around the Minister. Obviously the framework is linked, and I know it's a minimum of 10 years linked to the census, which is really, really important. But the challenges that I see, and I suppose where I would see that high level information that's been given in the top part of the statement of the National Planning Statement from the Minister, is in relation to what I see, which are the huge deficits. When you look at that infrastructure tracker at the moment, for example, it talks about Uisce Éireann, like Irish Water, just water infrastructure capacity constraints. Like you look at Galway City, and it says it literally has 0% capacity available to actually meet the requirements of a population increase. I mean, I come from a town where I want to see it double. They were looking at Athlone, which is about 20,000 people that you're going to see move up to about 30,000 people. It's the plan by 2032, which is the time period of those regional economic strategies. But when you look at towns like Galway County, which are at 20%, Roscommon fares a lot better. It's got 76% capacity. That means settlements in the county, the towns in the county are able to take on an increase. But there are huge challenges around infrastructure in rural areas. And when I talk about NWRA, at a European level, of course, we're a region in transition. We dropped. And in fact, we're the only region in the whole of Ireland that is seen as a region in transition. And if I might also mention, Minister, when you look at what they have in this report, and I know it's just a recent report, I very much appreciate that, but when you look at this, they speak about Regional Competitiveness Index, which is done by Development Stage and Index Score. And when you look at where Northern and Western, which is Ireland, a transition region, we rank 218th out of 234 NUTS2 regions. So we rank fairly poorly in relation to this. And I suppose my question is in relation to this National Planning Statement. Not all things are equal across the regional areas. And I know I've heard Senator Chambers talk about the challenges there. I mean, I do see that we have nearly 18 people working in the NWRA, but it is difficult if we're going to see that, that there is a regional balance, but that it has to take into account. It's not, all things are not fair in this world. All things are not starting from the same base level. We are literally starting from a huge deficit in the Northern Western Regional Assembly. And I suppose my question is just in the preparation when the Minister is reviewing these national planning statements, just in relation to how and in what way are they going to be taken into account maybe the proposals that come from the 3. So I know that there's the National Planning Statement, there's the 3 RSES, the Regional Economic Strategies, and then you have 30-odd local area plans as well. The only other part that I would wish to mention as well was just in relation to, I suppose, Minister, on obviously when you're looking at the RSES, and it's going to be taken into account a lot of these reports, and they're doing excellent work. I understand the Regional Economic RSES and the NWRA, the regional assemblies, and they are made up of local public representatives across all of those counties. But the challenge is that the deficits that we're dealing with, and I suppose that's where my focus comes in. I want to be in an area where we're bringing more people to live and to work in the West. It's what I talk about day in, day out, about what a wonderful place it is to live. And I do see, even from the local elections, you'd meet so many families, people in their 30s and 40s, actually moving back to the likes of Athlone because they can get work, or they can work remotely. Maybe they just need to be in Dublin 1 or 2 days a week. I was out here, and when we were in Dublin city centre, even meeting somebody from home that travelled up on the train. But all of these things like services, transport services, train services, a lot of those have been increased. Our coach services, however, just basic transport, buses that have been taken off the route, air coach, and I am calling here for a view of the 20 bus, for example. But again, that crisscrosses, it travels from Dublin to Galway. These are infrastructural needs, but they crisscross those regional economic RSES areas. And I guess that's my question to you. How do we integrate, when we say there's a huge need and it crisscrosses like that in Athlone, how do you manage that with the Minister's statement? And then finally, just in relation to housing was just the very last one. In one of the NWRA Northwestern Regional Assembly statements, probably about 4 years ago, they indicated that over 95% of housing was a B2 level or under. 95% of housing in that area. Now, obviously, we have a very much older cohort. But again, that comes down to, we talk about development, but it's very clear that even what we have currently, and I mean, this is where the likes of the vacant refurbishment grant comes in and so on, and I know the retrofitting and the work that we're putting in around the retrofitting and so on, but it just shows that we're looking at new housing, which we want to see. We want to see, obviously, better access to water infrastructure, wastewater treatment plants in our towns. But if I'm looking at how do I say to the likes of our town at home in Ballinasloe and Roscommon Town, that we will have the capacity to be able to expand. And yet there's so much of our housing that doesn't even meet the basic need of, say, B2. So these are just, to me, at a local level, as a local representative in my area, key issues for me when it comes to planning. And I suppose just how we talk about planning so far ahead, I sort of feel that we're so far behind. And I suppose that's where the Minister's statement, when we're looking at this in terms of the development across these regions, is going to be, to me, going to be absolutely crucial. Gur Mágat.